my very athletic buddy Mike Norman says sometimes it can be stimulative. So, Mike, you think this spending will do the trick?
I'm still thinking about the chicken wings. They're making me hungry here. Look,
they're phenomenal. But I digress.
All right, look, the data is very clear on this. And I did this for you, by the way,
yes,
because I hear you every day saying, is there any proof that spending really works? And the great thing about this is you could go back, the government has historical tables going back to 1789.
Yeah, but your data lies. But go ahead and refer to your line.
It doesn't lie, because when you look at spending as a percentage of GDP, there's a very clear correlation between periods in time when government spending ramped up significantly. We saw a very positive response in the economy, and vice versa. When we saw spending come down sharply, we saw the economy slow down, and in many cases...
So when it's a lower percentage of GDP, you don't get much bang for your buck. But you go through the Depression period.
Yeah,
the real bang in spending was World War II.
Right. Well, exactly. You know how a lot of people say, well, the New Deal stuff, that didn't work. Precisely, because if you look at the numbers through the 1930s, the only period we really had, 1934, 1935, we did get a pop in spending. And 1934, by the way, we had the first positive year in GDP growth. By 1936-37, spending came down. We pretty much balanced the budget, and we went back into recession again. But you're right. 1943, 44, 45, we saw spending go
but we
historic.
were cumulatively throwing tons of money at the system here. Now, you go forward, the 40 years or so to the Reagan period.
The Reagan thing is interesting.
Go ahead.
First, let me just say, government spending is a big component of GDP. Okay, you have consumption, you have business investment,
right.
You have spending, you have net exports. And government spending now is twice as big as a private capital investment. But let's look at Reagan.
And that, by the way, in itself is a dangerous trend, I think. But go ahead.
Well, look, let's first look at Reagan. We hear from the supply siders that the tax cuts were the reason for the Reagan boom, right? Yet spending under Ronald Reagan, spending as a percentage of GDP, was the highest it was in the entire post-World War II period. We've not even approached that any time since. Now, we will...
Do you include those tax cuts as spending?
No. That was the spending was spending on military, there was spending on agriculture.
I grant you that, but there's a way to lump all it together to say that this was lump government activity.
Here's what it did. The tax cuts, there's no question that it added to people's incomes, okay? But the spending on top of that was like putting the economy on steroids. It was huge.
I know, but you're echoing my point that the tax cuts that came in and the revenue it created, the wherewithal for Congress to spend that money and then some. I'm not denying that the tax cuts created revenue that they ended up spending. But I am stating that without the tax cuts, they wouldn't have had the wherewithal to do the spending they did.
No, the government could spend any amount of money it wants. It spends in its own money, and it's not constrained by the amount of tax revenues it takes in or the sale of treasuries.
But no, I know what you're saying. But the tax cuts created
later
revenue.
That happened, Neil.
I'm granting you that. But I'm saying what happened, though, is that then they spent that money and then some. I'm faulting Congress on that. I'm faulting Republicans and Democrats on that. But I am saying that which is more of a stimulant to you, tax cuts or spending? You're saying spending.
Well, I think right now you need the spending because if you look at people's behavior, simply giving them a tax cut.
You need government spending.
Look, I'm for tax cuts, but I think people are going to do the same thing with a tax cut as they did with the rebate checks last year. They're going to sit there and save them.
But a tax cut, sustained tax cuts, changing marginal rates substantively and for a good deal of time is very different than a one quick shot in the arm, a tax credit or a bonus,
who's
whatever.
Saying one quick shot in the arm? I think the thing we have to
well, $13 more a week, I'm saying.
That was dumb. They should have suspended the payroll tax for 2 years. I mean, that would have added $800 billion, $1 trillion
right,
a year.
So you're saying you're still open to tax cuts? And
I say we should do both. I think the thing we have to look at here is there's really nothing wrong with our economy. We have wealth-producing assets and real capital that create the wealth of this economy, and it's sitting there idle. And if we just sit here like this with
no. But Mike, do you find it all ironic that some of the biggest booms this country's experienced also occurred with, in the case of Bill Clinton, the top rate notwithstanding when he raised that, a lot of business-related taxes, capital gains, dividends were cut under his stewardship. We had a great big boom. But with Ronald Reagan, taxes across the board in all areas were cut. We had a great big boom.
But we had 24% of GDP spending. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Clinton because Clinton brought spending way, way down to the lowest level that we saw in the post-World War II period that coincided with the peak in the stock market in 2000 and the subsequent We went into the recession.
Well, you're not
Broad
connecting
spending.
those events. You could say a lot of that was the internet froth and unrealistically high, wacky kind of run-ups we had.
Neil,
right?
the numbers are very clear on this. I mean, you know, and anyone could go look this up. It's all publicly available.
I did. I looked at your data, and you're saying, in the case of the Clinton thing, that had he been increasing government spending more, we wouldn't have had the implosion of the internet bubble in 2000? Come on.
You know, I think what we really need to look at here, are we utilizing all the resources and the capital, including human capital,
So you are
real capital
a big
of the
liberal
nation?
and you believe in big
I'm
government.
not a big liberal, but
Yes,
I
you
don't
are.
think, look, if
You love government.
If you have a business and you lock the door of your business and you stand outside on the street, I mean, you're not going to get rich. You're not going to make any money. There's nothing wrong with our
So you think
economy.
the stimulus real quickly will work?
Yeah, it has to be bigger, and it will work, yeah.
Michael, thank you very much.